future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Raymond Ho.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister's opening statement was great because it at least proved one thing, that on this planet, we all will be judged by our actions and not our words. The problem with the Prime Minister's speech is that it had too many high-sounding words and too few actions. For the second term and in its fifth year, all we got is that 1,000 people a week were leaving for Australia. Unemployment of 7.3% was the highest in 14 years. That 85,000 young people were not in work or in training, and that New Zealand had the worst economic growth of any government in the past 51 years.
It's true.
No wonder the Prime Minister has changed from Mr. Nice to Mr. Grumpy and Mr. Angry. Instead of outlining his government's plans and policy priorities, the Prime Minister used his speech to attack. He attacked the Greens for 11 times and the Labour for more than 23 times. And it is not hard to understand that. For the second term and in its fifth year, the National Act Maori government failed to deliver. And from the Prime Minister's statement, it is all someone else's fault. It has got an excuse for everything and a solution for nothing. For example, housing affordability. The New Zealand Herald reported last week that an international housing affordability survey listed Auckland as one of the most unaffordable cities in the world. It found housing in New Zealand has become more unaffordable in the last year, with median house prices now 5.3 times the median income. All 8 of New Zealand's property markets were seriously or severely unaffordable, and London, New York, and Los Angeles are all ranked more affordable than Auckland. And the response from our Prime Minister? He accused Kiwis of crying wolf. As Labour's spokesperson for building and construction, the flow-on issue would be how to get new houses built, and that brings us to the serious issue of the building law review. The Minister for Building and Construction, the Honourable Maurice Williamson, has so far presented 2 bills. Building Amendment Bill number 3 has now become Building Amendment Act 2012, and Building Amendment Bill number 4 is likely to receive its second reading in the near future. The number 4 bill is the second of 2 bills to implement the National's building law review policy decisions. The Building Act review, initiated by the last Labour government, has gained cross-party support. The review found weaknesses in consumer protection and a need to better allocate responsibility and accountability among consumers, building consenting authorities, and building professionals. Unfortunately, all we got from Minister Williamson is nothing substantial, but public gimmicks. For instance, under Building Amendment Bill number 3, Minister Williamson moved to get CCC changed. Any property lawyer will advise his or her clients of the importance to obtain a CCC. And the first question they would normally ask is whether the property has a CCC, namely Code Compliance Certificate. Now, Minister Williamson changed that and replaced the CCC with a new CCC called Consent Completion Certificate. What's the difference? Yeah, the difference is that the responsibility and accountability among the consumers, building consenting authorities, and building professionals have been reallocated, meaning the protection consumers would otherwise have is now further reduced. I agree with submitters that was a step too far until such time as the licensed building practitioner regime matures. According to the reports in the New Zealand Herald, that at this stage, the regime is more a system of ticking boxes than a means to upskill the industry. The new CCC is different from the old CCC, and this change will almost certainly have detrimental effect on desperate household owners seeking redress for severe losses. It is unacceptable and outrageous that it is now the consumers who will be left to pick up most of the bill for any claims resulting from substandard building work. It is equally unfair to building consenting authorities and building professionals. The measures in the bills do little to remove the risk that the building consenting authorities and building professionals would be left to pick up more than their fair share of the cost of defective building work. One overarching concern from those submitters is that the bills sought to redistribute the responsibility and the liability from the building consenting authorities in the event of building failures. We agree that the liability that has until now rested with the consenting authorities as a last man standing is unacceptable. This is because ratepayers have had to bear the cost of negligence claims brought against building consenting authorities. Ironically, submissions from some consenting authorities made it clear that the proposed changes would not improve their potential liability positions. They argued that in the absence of a more genuine reallocation of accountability, for instance, through mandatory home warranties, the introduction of proportionate liability and mandatory insurance, all parties, consumers, building practitioners, and building consenting authorities will continue to be financially exposed, even for defects not of their making. In their submissions, two of the country's biggest city councils, namely Wellington and Christchurch city councils, urged the government to include measures such as warranties in the bills to avoid a repeat of the leaky building saga. But such warranties must be backed by unbreakable long-term mandatory warranties and insurance. Both matters of a warranty and surety scheme and joint and several liability versus proportionate liability have been referred to the Law Commission for review. Fair enough. Again, we are convinced that the government is not ready to introduce a comprehensive reform package. The partial installment will cause uncertainty and create false hopes for parties in the building and construction sector. This indicates that the government cannot or will not introduce the broad reform package needed to genuinely achieve its stated goals. Do they care? I don't know. At best, they're not ready to introduce the much-needed reform and therefore took a piecemeal approach in both bills. At worst, they are still driven by the magic word of deregulation and just let the history repeat itself.
Another leaky home.
It is regrettable that Minister Williamson has not been nominated for the next Speaker. He would be a fine and a very experienced Speaker. Of course, he's experienced. Of course, he is experienced. He was the Minister who passed the Building Act 1991, which is responsible for the leaky buildings. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mike Sabin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and welcome back. Happy New Year to you, Mr. Speaker, and to all members of